Hello there, and welcome to Mysteries of Earth. Imagine a world where we are not the first to walk the earth with intelligence. A world where the familiar landscapes we traverse, forests, deserts, mountains, have already been touched by minds that thought, created, and perhaps vanished long before we arrived. Could it be possible that civilizations existed here before humans, leaving whispers of their presence buried beneath layers of time? It is a question that tugs at the edges of our imagination, one that sits uncomfortably between science and speculation. On the surface, it seems unlikely. Archaeology and geology show no definitive traces of advanced pre-human societies. No monumental ruins, no fossilized factories, no written records carved into stone. Yet, the absence of evidence is not always evidence of absence, especially when the timescales involved stretch across millions of years. A civilization that rose and fell tens of millions of years ago might have left nothing we could recognize today. Rocks crumble, wood decays, metals oxidize, and even the faintest chemical traces become muddled over geological epochs. The Earth is a relentless editor, erasing almost everything in the pursuit of renewal. And yet, traces could exist, hidden in plain sight. Patterns in nature, subtle anomalies in the geological record, unusual formations of minerals or metals. Could some of these be echoes of intelligence we have simply misinterpreted? Consider the intricate spirals of shells, the almost geometric arrangements of certain crystalline structures, or the peculiar layering of sediments in a forgotten canyon. Nature is endlessly inventive, and yet, how often do we mistake design for accident, or overlook design entirely because it doesn't match what we expect? Some scientists have speculated that future observers might struggle to recognize evidence of our own civilization a mere million years from now. Skyscrapers, roads, and bridges, monuments to human ingenuity, would collapse and crumble, reclaimed by the soil and the seasons. Plastics might persist, breaking down into microscopic shards, and traces of our energy use could linger in altered carbon isotope ratios in sediments. But the visible, tangible markers of our time would mostly vanish. If this is true for us, might it not also have been true for others? Could pre-human intelligence have left signals so faint that our current tools and assumptions cannot detect them? The challenge lies not only in survival, but in recognition. Intelligence does not always manifest as stone towers or metal tools. What if a pre-human species valued different forms of expression? Perhaps they sculpted not in concrete or steel, but in living trees, weaving homes and cities into forests without leaving lasting scars. Perhaps they mapped knowledge in chemical patterns, embedded in soils, waters, or mineral formations that we would never associate with sentience. Our definition of civilization is inherently human, shaped by our biology, our technologies, and our biases. Is it possible that we have overlooked alternative paths, forms of intelligence that do not resemble our own? Even the fossils we study could carry subtle hints. The precise alignment of bones, the unusual dispersal of objects in ancient riverbeds, the arrangement of pigments on stones, each could be interpreted as a coincidence of nature, or perhaps a remnant of thought long forgotten. When we look at the earth through the lens of preconceptions, we risk missing patterns that lie just beyond our framework of understanding. To entertain the possibility of pre-human civilizations is to expand that lens, to ask not only what we see, but what we are capable of imagining. And then there are chemical anomalies. Elements or isotopes present in unusual concentrations, synthetic compounds appearing inexplicably in ancient layers, mineral deposits that seem unnaturally refined. Could these be faint echoes of technology long erased? Our own industrial footprint will leave such markers, detectable millions of years into the future. If we assume the same possibility existed for others, the Earth itself may hold a palimpsest of experiments in intelligence. Yet, reading these records requires humility, for the Earth's language is subtle, and the lines between natural processes and purposeful action blur. This idea invites a reconsideration of what it means to leave a mark. Humans tend to measure legacy by monuments and artifacts, but intelligence is not measured in permanence alone. It can be expressed in fleeting designs, in ephemeral networks, in knowledge carried forward for a few generations before disappearing. A pre-human civilization might have been brilliant in its complexity, yet almost invisible to the eyes of modern science. And perhaps that is the ultimate reminder. Existence does not guarantee recognition. Of course, the possibility of pre-human intelligence raises profound questions. If others did exist, why did they vanish? Were they undone by environmental collapse, internal conflict, or some catastrophe we cannot yet imagine? Or did they choose paths that minimized environmental impact, leaving the Earth largely unchanged? Their disappearance might not be a story of failure, but of intentional restraint, a civilization whose lessons are hidden in the quiet whispers of nature, rather than the loud monuments of stone. Yet, even in the absence of proof, considering these possibilities reshapes our understanding of ourselves. It challenges the notion that humans are the first or only bearers of advanced thought on this planet. It invites humility, a recognition that intelligence is not unique to our species, and that the Earth may have hosted countless experiments in mind and culture, most of which ended before leaving an obvious trace. The shadows of these civilizations may still linger in the rhythms of life, in the patterns of evolution, and in the very ground beneath our feet. And in asking whether civilizations existed before us, we also begin to question what intelligence truly leaves behind. Is permanence the measure of worth, or is the fleeting act of thought enough to ripple through time in ways we cannot yet detect? Are we searching for towers and tools when the real signature of sentience could be far more delicate? A chemical arrangement, a fossilized idea, a structural whisper in rock that demands a new way of looking to understand. By contemplating these questions, we are not just peering into the distant past. We are examining the limits of perception, the boundaries of interpretation, and the assumptions that guide our understanding of history. Every fossil, every rock layer, every anomaly becomes a possible clue, a challenge to our perception, an invitation to wonder. The past may be richer, stranger, and more mysterious than we dare imagine. And so, as we step carefully into this terrain of shadows and questions, we must keep one thought close. If civilizations could rise before us and leave only whispers behind, then the Earth itself is a library far older and more complex than we can yet read. Somewhere in the layers of rock, the flow of rivers, and the patterns of life, hints of these vanished minds may still persist, waiting for the moment we learn to see them. In the next chapter, we will explore the cycles of intelligence, how life on Earth might rise, fall, and rise again, offering fleeting opportunities for civilizations to emerge, flourish, and disappear. Are we the first to tread this path, or are we simply the latest participants in a story written over millions of years? Language beyond our understanding, What does it truly mean to speak, to convey thought, or to share knowledge? When we imagine the rise of civilizations, our minds instinctively picture spoken words, written scripts, and symbols etched into clay or stone. But what if the languages of intelligence existed in forms we have yet to recognize? Forms that leave almost no trace at all? Could pre-human species have communicated in ways so subtle, so ephemeral, that the earth itself conceals the evidence? Language in any form is more than a collection of sounds or signs. It is a window into cognition, a framework for social cohesion, a method of transmitting knowledge across generations. To imagine communication beyond humans is to stretch our understanding of intelligence, to consider the possibility that minds might organize information and coordinate activity in ways utterly foreign to us. In our world, we see hints of this kind of language in the natural behaviors of other species. Dolphins and whales produce patterns of sound so complex that some researchers liken them to songs or conversations, yet the meaning remains largely mysterious. Birds compose intricate calls and sequences that can vary by region, almost like dialects, hinting at culture in miniature. Bees perform dances to communicate the location of resources, translating spatial knowledge into movement. Even plants and fungi have networks of chemical signaling, exchanging information about threats and opportunities, invisible to human senses. Each of these examples shows that communication does not require pens, pixels, or vocal cords. It requires only the ability to transmit and receive information effectively. Now, imagine a species far older than our own, evolving along a path we cannot fully envision. Perhaps their language was not spoken at all, but visual, patterns of bioluminescence, shifting colors aka, raw skin, or reflected in water surfaces. Perhaps it was chemical, subtle scents or pheromones carrying nuanced meaning, changing dynamically with time and context. Or perhaps it relied on vibrations, imperceptible to our ears, traveling through soil, rock, or water, connecting members of a community in ways we cannot detect. To a species with senses attuned differently than ours, these forms of language could have been as natural and obvious as speech is to us. The ephemeral nature of such communication has profound implications. If language leaves no permanent imprint, then the evidence of intelligence becomes much harder to identify in the fossil or geological record. Unlike carved symbols or engraved tablets, these languages dissolve with the passage of time, vanishing without leaving a trace. Could entire civilizations have existed, thriving on sophisticated networks of communication, only to disappear, leaving no physical proof behind? It is a haunting possibility, one that challenges our assumptions about the markers of intelligence. Language does more than transmit basic instructions. It structures thought. It enables planning, abstract reasoning, and the creation of shared concepts. A species capable of complex communication can organize its social structure, develop specialized roles, and transmit knowledge across generations. Knowledge, once encoded in ephemeral language, can ripple outward, influencing evolution itself. Consider how humans rely on language to pass down stories, strategies, and scientific discoveries. Without it, much of our civilization would collapse within a single lifetime. Could pre-human species have relied on invisible, delicate forms of communication that structured their societies in ways we might never imagine? If so, their social structures might have been astonishingly complex. Imagine communities coordinated not by laws or written codes, but by an invisible symphony of signals, light, sound, scent, vibration, each individual contributing to an ever-shifting network of knowledge. Conflicts could be mediated through subtle cues, alliances built through synchronized behavior, and survival strategies transmitted across generations without ever leaving physical documentation. To us, such a society might seem almost magical, a civilization woven into the very fabric of its environment. And yet, there may be traces, if we know how to look. Sometimes, the fossil record preserves indirect hints, patterns in dwellings, clustering of tools or objects, arrangements of stones or shells that suggest repeated behavior. Certain chemical signatures could indicate large-scale coordination, evidence of shared knowledge encoded in the way landscapes were altered or species were cultivated. Even the distribution of animal populations or unusual plant patterns might reveal subtle manipulation, hints that a complex intelligence was at work. But these signals are faint, easily dismissed as coincidence or misinterpreted through the lens of human expectation. Cognitive scientists remind us that language and thought are intertwined. The ability to categorize, to anticipate, to reason abstractly often emerges alongside communication. Thus, evidence of sophisticated social coordination, even if it is fleeting or invisible, could point to minds capable of invention, problem-solving, and culture. It reframes intelligence not as a series of artifacts, but as patterns of interaction, as the emergent properties of networks, both biological and social. In this sense, language becomes a bridge between mind and environment, a signature of consciousness that can exist even without permanent material artifacts. Consider the possibility that these languages were multidimensional. Not confined to sound or sight alone, they could have involved combinations of modalities, visual patterns paired with chemical signals, tactile vibrations, reinforcing scent-based messages, each interaction layered with meaning, every gesture contributing to a tapestry of understanding that would be almost impossible for outsiders to decode. The sophistication required to coordinate such communication suggests minds capable of nuanced thought, of culture and shared innovation, of collective memory that transcends individual lifespans. If this is plausible, then the rise and fall of pre-human civilizations could have left little more than subtle echoes. Communities might have vanished, like whispers on the wind, their ideas dissolved into the soil, their songs fading into the atmosphere. And yet, the influence of these languages could persist indirectly. By shaping social behavior, guiding resource management, and structuring interactions with the environment, such communication might have left enduring patterns, foundations for ecological niches, pathways in evolution, and rhythms in population dynamics that future species could inherit. The idea also forces us to reconsider our own assumptions. We tend to equate civilization with permanence, buildings, monuments, records. But what if intelligence can flourish without leaving stone in its wake? What if the deepest and most profound structures of a society exist in forms that are transient, invisible, yet no less consequential? The story of life on Earth may include countless civilizations whose languages we cannot hear, whose ideas we cannot decipher, but whose influence still resonates in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Language beyond our understanding challenges us to expand the definition of culture, intelligence, and legacy. It asks us to look not only at what survives, but at what might have existed in forms that resist preservation. It invites humility, reminding us that the absence of physical evidence does not equate to the absence of thought, creativity, or social complexity. Perhaps pre-human civilizations communicated in ways that were perfectly suited to their perception of the world, leaving an ephemeral footprint that requires imagination to perceive. And as we ponder this, one question looms. If communication can be invisible, how does it shape the course of evolution? Could subtle languages have guided the behaviors of entire species, steering survival strategies, mating patterns, or environmental management? Could ephemeral intelligence ripple outward through ecosystems, influencing the trajectory of life on Earth in ways that are only faintly discernible to us today? These are questions not easily answered, but they remind us that the history of intelligence may be far more intricate and mysterious than our current records suggest. As we leave this chapter, we carry forward the idea that language, ephemeral, invisible, and profoundly shaping, may be the key to recognizing intelligence where we least expect it. It is a tool that can structure thought, bind societies, and leave legacies invisible to the naked eye, yet deeply imprinted on the fabric of life. In the next chapter, we will explore the tools and technologies that might have accompanied such civilizations. If language shapes thought and social organization, what physical traces, however subtle, might these pre-human minds have left behind? Could we find signs of creation, innovation, and industry buried in the rock, waiting for those who know where and how to look? The art of the unknown. What is art? Most of us imagine sculptures, paintings, music, and architecture, human creations designed to communicate beauty, emotion, or meaning. But if we step outside the narrow lens of human culture, the question becomes far more complex. Could a civilization that predated humans have developed its own forms of creative expression? And if it did, what would that art have looked like? To consider this, we must first accept that creativity is not unique to humans. Across the natural world, we see glimpses of behaviors that suggest aesthetic sensibility. Take the bowerbird of Australia. The male constructs elaborate structures from twigs, brightly colored objects, even pieces of plastic left by humans, arranging them with meticulous care to attract mates. The bower itself is not a nest, nor purely functional. It is decoration, a deliberate display of taste, an artistic statement that exists for both the creator and the observer. Or consider whales, whose haunting songs ripple across the oceans. These melodies shift and evolve over time, carrying patterns that may hold no immediate survival advantage, yet persist because they resonate socially and emotionally, echoing through generations. Even primates engage in behaviors that hint at artistry. Chimpanzees paint with brushes in captivity, arranging colors in seemingly deliberate patterns, while some wild species use leaves and branches to create ephemeral designs in the forest floor. Such examples reveal that creativity can emerge wherever cognition, dexterity, and social interaction converge. If a pre-human species achieved advanced intelligence, its art might have existed in ways we cannot immediately recognize. Perhaps it did not rely on pigments or tools at all. Imagine sculptures grown rather than carved, shaped from living plants guided by careful pruning, or forms created from the movement of stones across water, leaving patterns that shift with every tide. Perhaps art could have been auditory, a symphony of sounds, blending naturally occurring tones into sequences too subtle for humans to hear without specialized equipment. Or it could have been chemical, a bloom of scents layered in specific sequences, experienced collectively rather than individually. The scope of possibility is vast, bounded only by the senses and capacities of the species in question. Yet this art, no matter how sophisticated, would have been fragile. Unlike stone monuments or metalwork, ephemeral forms of expression rarely survive the passage of time. Wind, water, fire, and decay erase them quickly. Organic pigments fade, plant sculptures collapse, sounds dissipate, and chemical signals vanish. Even the traces of artistic intention, patterns of arrangement in shells or stones, may be misread as natural phenomena, their deliberate nature obscured by randomness. Preservation depends not only on durability, but on context. Art that thrives in a forest might vanish in a flood. Performances that echo across a canyon may leave no mark once the wind shifts. Civilization's legacy, then, may be far less permanent than we tend to assume. This fragility challenges our understanding of what counts as art. Humans often define creativity through permanence and visibility. Museums, galleries, monuments, archives. But intelligence need not create lasting structures to express culture. A species might value temporality, novelty, or integration with nature above longevity. What is considered beautiful or meaningful could differ radically from our concepts. Patterns that delight one species might be invisible to ours. Arrangements that convey profound social or spiritual messages could appear random to the untrained eye. Recognizing such art requires not only keen observation, but a willingness to look beyond human aesthetics to consider forms and mediums we might instinctively dismiss. Indirect evidence may be all that survives. Consider fossilized bowerbird-like nests, unusually symmetrical stone arrangements, or concentrations of objects that seem intentionally curated. Perhaps subtle chemical traces hint at the layering of scents in particular orders. Geological formations might have been altered by repeated ritual or ceremonial action, leaving signatures detectable only through careful analysis. Even the rhythms of environmental modification, paths cleared, terraces built, patterns of harvested vegetation, could be interpreted as a form of creative expression, evidence that intelligence once shaped not just survival, but the beauty of the world itself. The cognitive implications are profound. Engaging in art requires more than manual dexterity. It demands imagination, planning, and abstract thought. It is an exercise in experimentation, in projecting intention into the future and considering the experience of others. In this sense, art is a mirror of consciousness, reflecting a mind capable of abstraction and empathy. If pre-human species created art, even in ephemeral forms, it signals not only intelligence, but the presence of culture, identity, and perhaps even shared values. It is a reminder that creativity is deeply entwined with the evolution of thought and society. Art also shapes community. Displays and performances coordinate attention, transmit information, and reinforce social bonds. In humans, music, storytelling, and visual arts have long been central to communal rituals, teaching, and celebration. If pre-human civilizations developed similar behaviors, their creative endeavors might have served as a tool for cohesion, teaching, and memory, encoding knowledge in forms that endure only temporarily. Such art could have guided social evolution, affecting mating patterns, hierarchies, and alliances, leaving subtle imprints on the development, of the species itself. Perhaps the most compelling challenge is imagining art entirely alien to us. We are conditioned to think in lines, shapes, colors, sounds, and symbols familiar to human perception. But other species might have perceived entirely different dimensions: magnetic fields, ultraviolet patterns, chemical gradients, or vibrations through the ground. Their art could have been multidimensional, integrating sensory inputs we scarcely recognize. A single display might combine movement, color shifts, scent, and sound in a symphony that is invisible in its entirety to a human observer. And if it disappears with the passing of hours, days, or seasons, how could we ever hope to detect it millions of years later? This thought raises another question. Could creativity persist without evidence? Even if all physical traces vanish, the act of art may influence evolution, behavior, and environmental interaction. Patterns in species distribution, resource management, or landscape shaping could carry echoes of aesthetic choice, resonating through ecosystems long after the original creators are gone. In this sense, art becomes a force beyond mere decoration, a subtle shaping influence on the world itself, an imprint of intelligence that is not always visible, but nonetheless real. And yet, the silence of the past is tantalizing. The absence of visible monuments does not imply absence of experience. A species might have lived, loved, celebrated, and expressed itself in ways we will never fully understand, leaving behind traces so delicate that only imagination, guided by knowledge of natural behavior, can reconstruct them. The history of life on Earth may be richer, stranger, and more intricate than any fossil record could reveal. Every fossil, every stone arrangement, every unusual rhythm in the landscape might hint at minds whose creativity shaped their world in ways beyond our perception. Ultimately, considering the art of the unknown teaches us humility. It reminds us that intelligence does not require permanence, that culture need not be written in stone, and that the beauty of thought can exist even in forms invisible to human eyes. It urges us to recognize that our definitions of civilization, creativity, and value are not universal, but human-centered. If pre-human species achieved art, it might have been as fleeting and subtle as a bird's song, yet as significant as any monument we could erect. As we leave this chapter, the question lingers. If art could vanish so completely, what of technology, industry, and innovation? If ephemeral creativity could exist, perhaps physical, tools and complex systems might have also arisen, then disappeared without a trace. In the next chapter, we will explore the hidden archaeology of these hypothetical civilizations, the tools, structures, and artifacts that might lie buried, waiting for someone patient enough to notice, rise and fall. The life cycle of civilizations. Every civilization, no matter how grand or fleeting, shares a rhythm. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a shadow stretching across a landscape. Small groups of beings, whether human or hypothetical pre-human species, gather, experiment, and adapt. They discover the advantages of cooperation, of shared knowledge, of shaping their environment to suit their needs. From these small beginnings, patterns emerge. Tools are refined, shelters take shape, and resources are organized with purpose. What starts as survival slowly becomes design, intention, and ultimately, the foundations of civilization itself. From this initial stage, growth follows. Populations expand, territories are claimed, and new forms of social organization arise. Communication becomes more complex, knowledge is passed down, and systems of governance or consensus develop. Each innovation unlocks further potential. New tools allow more elaborate construction. Agriculture supports larger communities. Trade and exchange networks knit societies together. A civilization grows in influence and complexity, leaving an imprint not just on its inhabitants, but on the very land they inhabit. Rivers may be redirected, forests cleared, terraces built along mountainsides. Even at this stage, the planet begins to carry a record, subtle yet persistent, of intelligent activity. As complexity increases, so too does specialization. Individuals focus on narrower skills, from crafting materials to recording knowledge, from ritual performance to engineering infrastructure. Cities or communal hubs emerge, where architecture, administration, and cultural life intertwine. Innovation accelerates as each advance builds upon previous discoveries. At the same time, this complexity introduces fragility. Systems dependent on many interlocking parts are more susceptible to disruption. One failure in resources, energy, or governance can ripple through a civilization like a sudden storm through a delicate web. And yet, civilizations rarely collapse without warning. Often the pressures are slow and cumulative. Soil depletion from overfarming, climate shifts that alter rainfall patterns, the exhaustion of easily accessible resources, or the unintended consequences of technological advancement. Social tension may rise alongside material strain. Inequalities grow. Knowledge may accumulate in some regions while eroding in others. By the time a civilization reaches the limits of its stability, these forces have intertwined into a complex network of cause and effect, imperceptible to those living within it, but inexorable when viewed across decades, centuries, or millennia. Catastrophe may strike suddenly, a flood, fire, volcanic eruption, or comet impact, or gradually, as erosion, shifting ecosystems, or pandemics quietly destabilize life. Populations shrink, cities are abandoned, infrastructure decays, and knowledge is lost. The collapse of one civilization can take centuries or mere decades. The pace depends on the resilience of the systems involved and the severity of the pressures faced. In this decline, what survives is often fragmentary. Stone foundations overgrown by plants, faint terraces etched into hillsides, traces of metallurgy preserved in the soil, chemical anomalies signaling industrial activity long vanished. Even if the visible structures vanish entirely, the planet retains the record, subtle yet undeniable, of a once active intelligence. This life cycle, rise, growth, peak, decline, is universal, not limited to human history. It may be a natural consequence of the interaction between intelligent species and the finite world they inhabit. Evolution favors intelligence because it allows adaptability. But adaptability comes at a cost. Growth, specialization, and innovation provide immediate advantages, yet also create dependencies and vulnerabilities. Any species capable of shaping its environment, building complex societies, and manipulating resources is also creating the conditions for potential collapse. It is a delicate balance, and perhaps one that no civilization, however advanced, can escape entirely. The story of civilizations is also a story of scale. The influence of a small community may be local and ephemeral, leaving barely a mark in the geological record. A sprawling civilization, on the other hand, can alter entire watersheds, reshape coastlines, and modify the chemical composition of the atmosphere. Fossilized deposits may reveal sudden shifts in carbon isotopes, layers enriched with synthetic compounds, or unusual concentrations of metals that do not occur naturally. These markers are the fingerprints of intelligence, stretching across time, waiting for a future observer to recognize them. Even if the species themselves are gone, the planet remembers. Interestingly, not all collapses result in complete disappearance. Some civilizations fragment and merge, leaving descendants who carry forward fragments of knowledge, tradition, or technology. Others vanish entirely, leaving a clean slate for the next intelligent species to begin anew. This cycle may have repeated countless times over the eons, with each rise and fall shaping the ecological, geological, and even evolutionary context for what comes next. The legacy of intelligence may be more than monuments or artifacts. It may be the very structure of ecosystems, the distribution of resources, the shaping of niches that influence the evolution of future life. If we consider the possibility of pre-human civilizations, these principles take on a profound significance. A civilization might have flourished tens of millions of years ago, leaving behind no towers, no inscriptions, no visible city streets. Its existence might be detectable only in chemical signatures, anomalous sediment layers, or strangely organized geological formations. The planet itself could carry the memory of intelligence long before humans walked the earth, encoded in subtle patterns that challenge our ability to recognize them. To a distant observer examining a planet, such markers could suggest activity, innovation, and complexity, even if all direct evidence of life itself has vanished. Yet, there is poetry in this cycle of creation and dissolution. Civilizations arise because life adapts, learns, and experiments. They leave imprints on the world, both physical and cultural, and in doing so, they transform the environment in ways that can persist far longer than any individual organism. And when they fall, nature reclaims the space, filling in cities with forests, plains, or wetlands. Rivers return to their original courses, coastlines shift, and species diversify to occupy the niches left behind. Decline is not annihilation, it is transformation. The rise and fall of one civilization sets the stage for what comes next, whether that is another wave of intelligent life or the slow, steady evolution of ecosystems reshaped by absence. This raises deeper questions about continuity and legacy. How much of a civilization survives beyond its collapse? Is knowledge ever transmitted across species, across millions of years? Or does each wave of intelligence begin almost entirely from scratch? Could subtle environmental cues or artifacts influence the development of future species, providing them with hidden advantages or lessons learned too long ago to fully comprehend? Even in extinction, the actions of a civilization may echo into the distant future, a quiet reminder of the potential and fragility of intelligent life. The life cycle of civilizations also forces us to confront our own place in time. Human history is short compared to the vast stretches of geological and biological epochs. We are, in a sense, observers in the middle of the cycle, capable of seeing the patterns that might elude the civilizations that came before and those that may come after. We can witness growth, experiment with complexity, and recognize the signs of potential decline. Unlike hypothetical pre-human civilizations, we have the tools to study our own trajectory in real time, to anticipate pressures, and perhaps even to mitigate collapse. Yet the choice is ours to make, and the consequences, though delayed, may be unavoidable if ignored. As we consider the rise and fall of civilizations, the message becomes clear. Intelligence is a force that shapes worlds, but it is never immune to the limits of the environment, the fragility of complex systems, and the unpredictability of fate. Every civilization leaves a record, however subtle, in the planet itself. And those records, if examined carefully, may reveal a history far more intricate than we ever imagined, hinting at cycles of growth, creativity, and collapse long before humans appeared, or long after we are gone. In the next chapter, we will explore the traces that might survive even the most thorough collapse, the chemical signatures, geological anomalies, and minute artifacts that could allow future observers, human or otherwise, to detect the imprint of civilizations we may never see, yet whose echoes persist in the very fabric of the earth. Catastrophes and extinction events. Civilizations, no matter how advanced, are never truly in control. Beneath the illusion of stability lies a web of dependencies, fragile and intricate, always vulnerable to forces far beyond daily life. And sometimes, those forces strike with sudden, devastating precision. Asteroids, volcanoes, shifting climates, events that can reshape the planet in the span of days or decades, remind us that intelligence is not synonymous with invulnerability. Imagine a world where a civilization thrives, cities sprawling across continents, systems humming with coordination, knowledge accumulated over generations. Life seems steady, progress inevitable. And then, without warning, the sky changes. A fireball streaks through the atmosphere, an asteroid hundreds of kilometers wide plunging toward the planet. The impact is instantaneous and immense, a release of energy billions of times greater than the largest nuclear explosion ever conceived. Mountains crumble, oceans rise, dust and aerosols shroud the sky, blocking sunlight for months or even years. Crops fail, temperatures swing wildly. In the blink of geological time, a civilization that seemed permanent is thrown into chaos. Volcanic eruptions tell a similar story, though over longer scales. Entire regions can be buried under layers of ash and lava. The injection of sulfur and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere alters climate, triggering sudden cooling or warming that ecosystems struggle to absorb. Cities crumble under repeated earthquakes. Rivers are rerouted. Fertile lands turn barren. Populations decline, not from a single strike, but from the cascading consequences: starvation, disease, social unrest. Complex societies, dependent on stable food production, energy distribution, and communication networks, are particularly vulnerable. Their sophistication, which allows them to thrive in ordinary circumstances, becomes a liability when the extraordinary occurs. Even without an immediate violent trigger, gradual environmental shifts can erode the foundations of civilization. Changes in ocean currents, long-term drought, glacial cycles, or rising sea levels can challenge entire regions. Agriculture may fail repeatedly, undermining social cohesion. Infrastructure decays faster than it can be maintained. Knowledge, if not recorded and transmitted effectively, is lost. In these circumstances, collapse may unfold like a slow-motion disaster, invisible to those living through it, yet unmistakable to the geological record millions of years later. History, both human and pre-human, may be punctuated by these cataclysmic resets. Each extinction event, whether sudden or prolonged, wipes the slate clean in different ways. Some species vanish entirely, others survive in pockets, adapting and diversifying in the aftermath. And in the spaces left vacant, new possibilities emerge. Nature, resilient and patient, fills the void. Evolution does not pause for catastrophe, it accelerates in response. When a dominant species falls, niches open, and life experiments again, sometimes giving rise to intelligence, sometimes to entirely novel forms of adaptation we might never anticipate. Consider the aftermath of the asteroid that struck Earth 66 million years ago. The impact ended the reign of the non-avian dinosaurs, creatures that had dominated terrestrial ecosystems for more than 150 million years. In their absence, mammals, previously small and largely nocturnal, began to explore the empty niches, evolving diversity and complexity at a pace previously constrained. Could intelligence have arisen among other species? Had conditions favored it? We can only speculate. What we do know is that catastrophic events, while destructive, also create opportunities. Life is opportunistic, and intelligence, as we have seen, thrives in niches left open by previous failures. Catastrophes leave marks that endure far longer than civilizations themselves. Craters scar the surface of continents. Lava flows create new mountains. Layers of ash and sediment record moments of upheaval, trapped in stone for eons. Chemical signatures in rocks reveal spikes in iridium, sudden shifts in carbon isotopes, or traces of toxic gases that poison the atmosphere. For any future observer, these anomalies are undeniable evidence of sudden, planet-altering events. And if civilizations existed prior to us, the record of their collapse might be intertwined with these layers, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to interpret them. Yet, the true lesson of catastrophes is not only in the destruction they cause, but in their role as catalysts for renewal. Evolution, ecosystems, and potentially even intelligence itself are shaped in the wake of disruption. Extinction is not a full stop. It is a comma, a punctuation mark that signals transformation. Species that survive are often those capable of rapid adaptation, of flexibility in behavior and cognition. Environments that seem devastated are, over millennia, transformed into cradles of opportunity. Rivers carve new valleys, forests regrow, and complex food webs emerge where old ones once collapsed. The survivors inherit a world both altered and open, capable of supporting forms of life that were impossible before. This pattern, rise, catastrophe, recovery, is not exclusive to life on Earth. It may be a universal principle wherever complexity arises. Civilizations, no matter how intelligent, are ultimately part of the planetary system, subject to forces beyond their immediate control. Asteroids, supervolcanoes, climate shifts, these are reminders that intelligence can adapt, but not always prevent, and certainly not fully command, the sweep of cosmic events. The story of life is written not only in success, and so the cycle continues. Catastrophe leads to collapse, but also to opportunity. Life fills the gaps. Evolution experiments. New intelligence may emerge, perhaps in forms unimaginable to us, shaped by the landscapes forged in fire, ash, and water. It is a humbling thought. Every species, every civilization exists temporarily in a world that is larger, older, and more volatile than it can fully comprehend. The more we recognize the role of catastrophes, the more we understand that our own civilization is just one node in an endless chain of creation, destruction, and renewal. As we consider the forces that can end civilizations, the picture becomes clear. Collapse is not the antithesis of life, but a necessary part of its dynamism. Extinction events, while terrifying in scale, open doors for what comes next. They remind us that intelligence is resilient, but not immortal, adaptive, but not invincible. And in those spaces left by sudden absence, new possibilities arise, new forms of life, new social structures, new potential for intelligence to flourish. The echoes of past catastrophes might linger far longer than the civilizations themselves, embedded in rock, sediment, and chemistry. And in understanding them, we gain insight not only into the history of our planet, but into the fragile, transient, and yet remarkably persistent nature of intelligence itself. In the next chapter, we will explore the subtle traces that survive even the most violent collapses, chemical markers, anomalous mineral layers, and other signs that could allow future observers to detect civilizations that vanished long before humans ever walked the Earth. What remnants endure, and how might they reveal stories of life and intelligence lost to deep time? The cycles of intelligence. Throughout Earth's long history, life has evolved, adapted, and vanished countless times. We often tell the story of intelligence as a linear ascent, with humans as the apparent culmination of evolution's grand experiment. But what if that narrative is too narrow? What if intelligence is not a singular event, but a phenomenon that rises, fades, and resurfaces in cycles across deep time. Could Earth have witnessed multiple waves of intelligence long before Homo sapiens ever walked the planet? Imagine the surface of a young Earth, where life first ventures beyond single-celled simplicity. For hundreds of millions of years, ecosystems flourish, collapse, and renew. Each extinction event, each environmental upheaval, sets the stage for the next burst of innovation. In some of these windows, certain species might have evolved capacities that we associate with intelligence: planning, tool use, cooperation, communication. Perhaps some reached the threshold of civilization, building structures, storing knowledge, and transforming their surroundings. And then, just as suddenly as they emerged, they could vanish, leaving only whispers in the geological record. The idea of recurring intelligence challenges our assumptions. We like to think of human civilization as unique, an unbroken ascent toward complexity. Yet Earth's history suggests a different rhythm: emergence, growth, decline, and disappearance. Civilizations may rise, reshape their environments, flourish for millennia, and then fade under pressures both internal and external. Natural catastrophes, resource depletion, social fracturing, these forces are not new. Every civilization, no matter how sophisticated, eventually encounters limits imposed by the planet itself. What we call progress may be temporary, a flash of order against the vast backdrop of deep time. Could intelligence be inevitable? What of the knowledge generated by these vanished civilizations? Could lessons from one wave of intelligence influence the next? Or does each cycle begin almost from scratch? It is tempting to imagine that artifacts, inscriptions, or environmental modifications could act as a bridge across time. But in reality, the geological clock is unforgiving. Mountains erode, sediments shift, and tectonic forces recycle the crust. Even the most durable structures can vanish, leaving only subtle chemical or physical anomalies behind. Knowledge, like a candle in a storm, may flicker and vanish before it can be passed on. Perhaps each civilization is destined to rediscover the world anew, grappling with the same challenges and opportunities as its predecessors. Yet even if each cycle begins largely from scratch, traces may linger in ways more subtle than stone or metal. Domesticated species, altered ecosystems, or geological markers might carry hints of prior intelligence. Consider the possibility that certain extinct animals were shaped or influenced by the presence of previous civilizations. Could behavioral modifications, patterns of habitat selection, or selective pressures provide indirect legacies of intelligence? The evidence would be faint, fragmented, and enigmatic, barely perceptible to any observer trying to piece together a story millions of years later. This raises an unsettling thought. The rise and fall of civilizations may not be a march toward greater complexity, but a repeating pattern, a wheel rather than a ladder. Each cycle is its own story, shaped by the conditions of its time. Some may favor technological innovation, others social cohesion, others environmental harmony. There may be no guarantee that each successive wave surpasses the last in sophistication. Intelligence, in this framework, is not a singular pinnacle to be reached, but a recurring opportunity. The idea of cycles also reframes our own existence. If intelligence rises and falls repeatedly, then our civilization is neither the beginning nor necessarily the end. We occupy a moment in a broader rhythm, a fleeting phase in a sequence that may have been repeated countless times and could be repeated again. Understanding this context can be humbling and liberating. Humbling because it reminds us that our achievements are transient. Liberating because it offers the perspective that life's resilience and adaptability are greater than any single species or civilization. Even if we falter, intelligence may arise again, molded by the lessons or mistakes of what came before. Cycles of intelligence may also suggest a new lens through which to view human history. Our triumphs and failures are not merely local or temporal phenomena. They are part of a recurring pattern that unfolds across deep time. Environmental stewardship, technological innovation, social cohesion, and collapse are threads in a tapestry that has likely been woven many times before. Recognizing the patterns may provide insight not only into our potential future, but into the possibilities that Earth has long held for life capable of reflection, creativity, and complex problem-solving. And yet, for all the cycles we can imagine, the evidence remains elusive. The deeper we reach into the geological record, the fainter the traces become. Millions of years erase cities, technologies, and even the most striking structures. The possibility of pre-human civilizations is therefore not merely a question of imagination. It is a question of probability, interpretation, and humility. How do we discern intelligence that left almost no mark? How do we distinguish between natural anomalies and deliberate design? And how do we accept the limitations of our own perspective, constrained by biology, technology, and time? Imagining a world without us, what if we vanished tomorrow? Not gradually, not over centuries, but in an instant, a sudden absence of humans across the entire globe. It is a question that shakes the imagination, a thought experiment both unnerving and illuminating. Without us, the intricate networks of civilization, roads, power grids, factories, farms, would be left to their own devices. But what would the world actually look like in the days, years, and millennia that followed? And what could this tell us about civilizations that might have existed before us, leaving only the faintest traces behind? In the first hours, the change would be nearly imperceptible from a distance. Cities would remain lit for a time, the hum of electrical grids still flickering along their circuits. Vehicles would idle on streets and highways, some engines still running, others stilled forever. The atmosphere might feel the same to any observer flying overhead, unchanged and calm. Yet beneath the surface, a slow, inexorable unraveling would begin. Power plants dependent on human oversight would soon falter. Nuclear reactors, designed with multiple automated safety systems, would shut down in sequence, leaving behind the legacy of both precaution and danger. Coal-fired and gas plants would lose their operators, their furnaces dying down, smokestacks falling silent. Water treatment plants would falter within days, sending rivers and reservoirs into chemical imbalance. The first seeds of ecological chaos would be sown, unnoticed at first, but unstoppable in their unfolding. Nature, ever patient, would begin its reclaiming. Rodents, insects, and other opportunistic species would surge into abandoned spaces, scavenging stores of food humans left behind. Domesticated animals would be forced to fend for themselves. Dogs, cats, livestock, some adapting, others disappearing rapidly. Birds and other, yet some traces would endure. Plastics, unless exposed to sunlight, could persist for centuries or even millennia, breaking into fragments but not fully vanishing. Glass, ceramics, and certain alloys might survive tens or hundreds of thousands of years, though often unrecognizable without context. Underground infrastructure, tunnels, pipelines, foundations, would be shielded from erosion and could linger far longer than the surface structures. And then there is the invisible legacy: chemical fingerprints. Carbon isotope ratios altered by fossil fuel use, synthetic compounds, and pollutants would embed themselves in soil and rock, forming markers detectable to a future intelligence, long after most tangible artifacts had disappeared. Consider a timeline of decades to centuries. Roads fragment, forests encroach, and wetlands reclaim low-lying regions. Cities collapse into chaotic mosaics of stone, metal, and plant growth. The architecture of human ambition dissolves, yet the subtle changes we imposed on the planet, landfills, chemical residues, shifts in animal populations, leave a detectable layer, a thin but distinct record within the geological column. If a future species were to dig carefully into these sediments, they might detect anomalies, an unusual concentration of plastics, microscopic industrial byproducts, or isotopic shifts in carbon, nitrogen, or oxygen. These would be the faint echoes of a vanished civilization, the kind of traces that might survive millions of years of erosion and tectonic activity. Over millennia, even these markers would fade. Rivers would redistribute sediments. Glaciers would grind and transport soil. Tectonic movements would bury and alter the landscape. But some chemical signatures, embedded deeply in rock strata, could persist for tens of millions of years, offering subtle evidence to any future observer that an intelligent species once transformed the planet. These are the remnants that tell a story far more resilient than stone or steel, a testament not to what we built, but to the indelible fingerprints of our activity. Now imagine applying this thought experiment backward. If humanity could vanish and leave only a faint chemical and structural signature detectable millions of years later, then civilizations long predating us might have left equally subtle traces. Mountains erode, oceans shift, and continents drift over immense spans of time. Any structures, cities, or roads from a pre-human civilization could have been obliterated by natural forces. Written records, metals, and buildings might be gone entirely, leaving only subtle anomalies in sediments, unusual mineral deposits, or patterns in fossilized ecosystems. The deeper we look into Earth's past, the more plausible it becomes that intelligence could have arisen and disappeared without leaving the unmistakable evidence we usually associate with civilization. Yet, the thought of a world without us also highlights the resilience and adaptability of life. Nature does not wait. It moves into voids we leave behind. Forests reclaim plains, rivers meander freely, and new ecological niches emerge. Evolution accelerates in response to newly available spaces and pressures. In our absence, the planet would not be static. It would be dynamic, an ever-changing canvas for life. If intelligence recurs, as we have speculated in previous chapters, then the eventual emergence of another conscious species becomes not just possible, but likely over vast stretches of time. What is particularly revealing is how quickly our dominance is erased. For all our monuments and skyscrapers, the Earth's processes operate on a pace that seems deliberate, patient, and merciless. Cities collapse faster than mountains erode. Forests grow faster than deserts form. This insight reframes our assumptions about pre-human civilizations. Even a highly intelligent and industrious species could leave nearly invisible traces, detectable only through careful, sophisticated analysis of sediments, isotopes, or anomalies in the fossil record. Civilization, in the geological sense, can be ephemeral. And yet, even in imagining our sudden disappearance, there is a strange comfort. The Earth is resilient. Life rebounds, adapts, and flourishes. New opportunities for intelligence may arise, shaped by the absence we leave behind. In this way, contemplating a world without humans is not just a lesson in humility. It is a mirror, showing us the faint footprint we leave and the impermanence of even our greatest achievements. It also provides a model for thinking about intelligence before us. Perhaps their world vanished, just as ours could, leaving only whispers embedded in the soil, chemicals, or subtle fossil patterns. By considering our own potential erasure, we gain insight into the plausibility of pre-human civilizations. They could have existed, innovated, and disappeared, leaving only faint markers that might go unnoticed or be indistinguishable from natural phenomena. The lesson is humbling. Intelligence may be transient, and the traces it leaves, physical or chemical, may be fleeting in the grand sweep of deep time. Yet the mere possibility expands our understanding of what Earth's history could encompass and what forms of life might have risen and fallen before the dawn of humanity. And as we reflect on these possibilities, we begin to ask new questions about legacy and observation. What does it mean to leave a mark? Is the measure of civilization the visible monuments we erect, or the subtle imprints of our activity that persist in layers of sediment and rock? And crucially, what kind of world are we shaping now, knowing that these traces may outlast us, long after the last human voice has been silenced? In the next chapter, we will move from imagining disappearance to contemplating the traces that endure across deep time, the chemical, geological, and physical markers that might allow a future species, or even humans in the distant future, to detect civilizations long vanished. We will ask how a planet records intelligence, and how faint evidence can become a message echoing across millions of years, lessons from the past, and responsibilities of the present. We've wandered through shadows of a world without us, imagined civilizations that might have come before, and traced the fragile fingerprints left behind by intelligence over deep time. And now, we arrive at a question that is far less abstract. What can these reflections teach us about our own time? If pre-human civilizations existed, or even if they did not, the exercise of imagining them forces us to confront our choices, our impact, and the legacy we will leave in the geological record. For millennia, humans have looked to the past to understand the present. Fossils, ruins, and sediment layers tell stories of extinction and adaptation, of life reshaping itself after moments of upheaval. But what if those lessons extended beyond biology and archaeology? What if they reached into the realm of civilizations themselves, hinting at patterns of growth, collapse, and renewal that might apply to us today? Imagining civilizations that predate us invites a kind of perspective rarely found in human life. The sense that our achievements, our mistakes, and our influence are not isolated events, but part of a larger continuum stretching across eons. Consider the very act of imagining. A pre-human civilization might have risen and fallen, leaving only chemical signatures in sediment, distorted isotopes in rock, or subtle disruptions in fossilized ecosystems. They may have faced limits we are now intimately familiar with: resource scarcity, climate variability, social conflict, or technological complexity that outpaced their capacity to manage it. And perhaps they did not endure. Perhaps their story ended quietly, erased from the visible record, leaving only whispers for us to speculate upon. What does this teach us about ourselves? For one, it reminds us that civilization is neither inevitable nor permanent. Our ability to manipulate the world is extraordinary, but it carries consequences that extend far beyond our immediate perception. The carbon we release, the chemicals we synthesize, the landscapes we alter, these are our signatures, not only to our own time, but to the far future. They are the legacy that will persist, in some form, long after our individual lives, and perhaps even our species, have vanished. This is where responsibility comes into focus. Unlike hypothetical predecessors lost to deep time, we have knowledge. We can trace cause and effect, model potential futures, and observe the fragility of the systems upon which our civilization depends. We know, for example, that fossil fuel emissions alter the climate, that industrial pollutants accumulate, that biodiversity loss weakens ecological resilience. Every choice, from energy production to urban planning, from agriculture to resource extraction, contributes to a record that will endure. We are, in a very real sense, stewards of the planet's memory. Yet stewardship is not just about minimizing damage. It is also about creating something meaningful. Imagining pre-human civilizations allows us to ask, what would we want to leave behind if future species, human or otherwise, were to study us millions of years from now? Would they encounter a cautionary tale, a world scoured by pollution and resource depletion, or would they see evidence of balance, ingenuity, and adaptability? Our ability to influence the planet has never been greater, but neither has the permanence of our impact. Even fleeting actions today, waste disposal, industrial production, land management, will be recorded in the geological strata of tomorrow. There is also a subtle paradox in this awareness. On one hand, the thought of civilizations lost to time can be humbling, even terrifying. If intelligent species can vanish without leaving obvious traces, what chance do we have of enduring? On the other hand, the exercise instills a profound opportunity. We can intentionally craft the traces we leave behind. Through sustainable practices, careful preservation of knowledge, and thoughtful management of ecosystems, we can shape our legacy with deliberation rather than leaving it to chance. The fossil record, the sediment layers, the chemical signatures of our age, these can become a record of wisdom as well as consequence. It is here that science and imagination intersect. The same methods we use to study ancient life, geochemistry, stratigraphy, paleontology, also offer insights into how future observers might read the Earth we shape today. By viewing ourselves as if through the lens of millions of years, we gain a perspective that is both sobering and empowering. We begin to see patterns of vulnerability, to recognize pressures that could lead to decline, and to imagine ways in which our civilization might endure rather than collapse. Knowledge, in this context, becomes a tool not just for understanding, but for survival. This perspective also reframes the notion of progress. If civilizations before us existed and vanished, it suggests that advancement is not necessarily cumulative. Growth, technology, and complexity do not guarantee permanence. Environmental conditions, social cohesion, and adaptability are equally critical. For us, that means recognizing the limits of what we can control. Our innovations, remarkable as they are, must be paired with foresight and humility. Intelligence alone is insufficient. Resilience becomes the true measure of a civilization capable of enduring. In practical terms, this means integrating sustainability into every layer of society. Energy systems, infrastructure, agriculture, urban planning, and cultural preservation all contribute to the long-term resilience of our civilization. Unlike our hypothetical predecessors, we can anticipate consequences and design for them. Renewable energy, ecosystem restoration, circular economies. These are more than policy choices. They are the very means by which our civilization can leave a responsible, enduring legacy. The same patterns that may have doomed earlier societies can be observed in our own trajectory if we ignore them. But they can also be avoided if we act with foresight. There is also a moral dimension. Knowing that our actions will resonate far beyond our lifetimes transforms the ordinary into the profound. Every decision about resource use, waste management, and environmental stewardship carries ethical weight. To imagine that future species, or perhaps even distant human descendants, might one day read the traces we leave, adds a dimension of accountability that transcends politics, economics, and daily convenience. We are participants in a story that stretches across time, and our role is not incidental. Finally, contemplating the lessons of imagined pre-human civilizations encourages reflection on humility and wonder. We are not the first to reach complexity, and we may not be the last. Our place on Earth is part of a continuum, one that extends backward into unknowable eons, and forward into a future shaped by choices yet to be made. The thought that others, intelligent, creative, and industrious, may have come before us, shaping and altering their own world, reminds us that human achievement is remarkable, but not unique. The Earth has hosted, and will host, forms of intelligence far beyond any single species. As we move forward in time, we are not merely observers, we are authors. The layers of sediment, the chemical signals, the preserved artifacts we leave behind, they will speak for us long after we are gone. How we act now determines whether those echoes convey wisdom, destruction, or a mixture of both. Imagining civilizations that preceded us offers both caution and inspiration, a mirror in which to reflect our potential and our limitations. And as this reflection draws to a close, one question lingers. If intelligence is transient, fragile, yet resilient, what choices today could extend our presence in the cycle of life on Earth? What actions could allow the traces of our civilization to be read not as warnings alone, but as lessons, as a testament to foresight and care? The answers lie not in speculation, but in deliberate action, in the decisions we make in the present that will ripple across centuries, millennia, and perhaps millions of years. In the next chapter, we will step further into the unknown, examining the possibility that intelligence itself is cyclical, that civilizations rise and fall repeatedly across geological time, and that our own story may be one link in an endless chain. We will explore the patterns of emergence, the rhythm of decline, and the tantalizing question of whether knowledge can ever truly pass from one cycle. Mystery as a tool for imagination and reflection. Mystery is often treated as the absence of knowledge, a void, a problem to solve, a question left unanswered. But what if mystery is not merely a gap, but a tool? A lens through which we explore not only the world around us, but also the ways we think, imagine, and reflect. In the context of civilizations, intelligence, and deep time, mystery becomes more than curiosity. It becomes a guide, an invitation to step beyond the comfortable narratives we construct and into the boundless possibilities that history and nature conceal. Consider for a moment the immense spans of time we've been exploring. Millions of years, layers of rock, the slow accumulation of fossilized life, and the chemical traces of a world long past. In that expanse, certainty is fleeting. The more we learn, the more the unknown seems to expand. But rather than creating frustration, that uncertainty can inspire awe. It reminds us that what we know, though significant, is only a fragment of the larger story, a single note in a symphony that has been playing since the Earth's formation. Mystery invites humility. It forces us to acknowledge our limitations and to appreciate the profound complexity of life, intelligence, and civilization. In thinking about pre-human civilizations, mystery serves another purpose. We cannot know whether such societies existed or what forms they may have taken. No monumental ruins mark their presence. No written records endure. And yet, imagining them sharpens our awareness of possibility. What if intelligence emerged in a form utterly different from our own? What if their tools were not metal and stone, but biological, ephemeral, or symbolic in ways we scarcely recognize? Mystery allows us to explore these scenarios freely, without the constraint of what is documented or proven. It stretches our minds to consider the limits of creativity and adaptation, to challenge assumptions about what a civilization must look like to be considered advanced. Mystery also shapes curiosity in a practical sense. Scientists, archaeologists, and historians often begin with questions for which there is no immediate answer. Some of the most profound discoveries, mass extinctions, shifts in climate, or traces of previously unknown species, emerged precisely because someone followed a thread of uncertainty rather than settling for an accepted narrative. By valuing the unknown, we remain open to surprises, to evidence that challenges what we think we understand. Mystery becomes a framework for discovery, encouraging observation, experimentation, and reflection rather than complacency. But it is not only about intellectual engagement. Mystery also cultivates imagination and wonder. When we picture civilizations lost to time, languages never deciphered, or art dissolved into the soil, we engage with the world not as it is, but as it could have been. That act of imagination has value in itself. It forces us to see our own civilization from a distance, to question its permanence, and to measure our impact against the vast, enduring processes of geology, biology, and planetary evolution. In the silence of uncertainty, our minds find space to wander, to hypothesize, and to dream. Holding space for mystery also has a stabilizing influence on perspective. If we imagine a civilization that preceded us, we are reminded that we are neither the first nor necessarily the last to reach complexity. If we accept that intelligence and culture might emerge, flourish, and vanish again, we recognize that the human story is a part of a larger continuum. Mystery, in this way, fosters humility, a recognition that our achievements, though remarkable, are not unique in the cosmic timeline, and that our mistakes are not unprecedented. It encourages us to see ourselves as part of a chain, a cycle, rather than as isolated actors on a static stage. This openness to the unknown also reshapes the way we think about knowledge and legacy. Consider what remains after a civilization disappears: chemical anomalies, subtle geological markers, fragments of art, traces of engineered landscapes. Often, these remnants are ambiguous, open to interpretation, incomplete. Mystery teaches us that not all information arrives neatly packaged. Some of the most significant insights require careful reading between the lines, a willingness to infer and imagine beyond what is immediately visible. By practicing this skill in contemplating pre-human civilizations, we develop a mindset attuned to subtlety, complexity, and nuance, qualities essential for understanding our own world. Yet mystery is not merely about looking backward. It also informs how we approach the future. By acknowledging the gaps in our knowledge and embracing uncertainty, we become better prepared to anticipate challenges we cannot yet see. Civilizations may rise and fall, ecosystems may shift unpredictably, and intelligence itself may evolve in forms we cannot foresee. Mystery cultivates adaptability, a readiness to explore alternative paths, and a recognition that not all answers come at the time or in the form we expect. Tiki. In a world dominated by rapid change, that mindset can be as valuable as technology or policy. Interestingly, mystery can even be protective. It discourages overconfidence, the belief that we fully understand the rules of life, civilization, or planetary systems. If we assumed we had complete knowledge, we might act recklessly, convinced that the consequences of our choices are predictable. By contrast, embracing the unknown encourages caution, reflection, and foresight. Mystery is a gentle reminder that the Earth is older, larger, and more intricate than any single species can fully grasp. It invites respect for the systems we inhabit and for the intelligence that may yet arise after us. At the same time, mystery allows creativity to flourish. When questions remain unanswered, we are free to construct thought experiments, to imagine alternatives, and to explore scenarios unconstrained by existing evidence. Could intelligence have arisen underwater, among creatures with senses we cannot fathom? Could civilizations have been transient, ephemeral, leaving no tangible structures behind? Could knowledge itself exist in ways that defy our current understanding of communication or memory? These are not questions we can answer definitively, but asking them expands our conceptual horizon and deepens our appreciation for the potential diversity of life and culture. In essence, mystery functions as a bridge between knowledge and imagination. It keeps us aware of what we do not know, while simultaneously encouraging exploration. It reminds us that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and that the most profound truths may emerge in fragments, in shadows, and in whispers left behind by time itself. By nurturing mystery, we cultivate patience, creativity, and a sense of connection to the broader tapestry of life and history. And yet, there is a subtle beauty in leaving some questions unanswered. If we could know everything, if every civilization, past or present, were fully mapped and understood, the sense of wonder, the thrill of speculation, the space for imagination would vanish. Mystery preserves a kind of freedom. It allows us to wander across landscapes of possibility, to envision civilizations both alien and familiar, to feel the vastness of deep time, and to recognize our place within it. In this way, mystery is not an obstacle, but a companion. It is a lens that sharpens observation, enriches thought, and nurtures humility. As we close this chapter, it is worth reflecting on how the habit of mystery influences the way we live now. We inhabit a world of astonishing complexity and fleeting presence. By embracing what we do not know, we allow ourselves to learn, to imagine, and to act responsibly. Mystery encourages us to value the process of inquiry itself, to remain open to surprises, and to approach the unknown with reverence. It reminds us that while answers are important, questions, especially the ones that cannot be fully answered, have a unique and enduring significance. And as the curtain of uncertainty draws gently across the scene, we are left with a quiet invitation to carry wonder with us, to hold space for the unseen, and to let the unknown guide reflection, creativity, and care. In the next, and all chapter, we will return from imagination to presence, exploring how these reflections on past, present, and future converge in the singular moment we inhabit, the here and now. We will consider what it means to live fully aware of the cycles of time, the traces of civilization, and the fragile, fleeting opportunity to shape the legacy we leave behind. The present as a crossroads. There is a fleeting quality to the present that is easy to overlook. Amid the rhythm of daily life, the routines, the familiar sights and sounds, we often forget that this moment, right now, is the only point in time we truly inhabit. The past is fixed, etched into rocks, bones, and the faint chemical traces of what came before. The future, by contrast, is unformed, a web of possibilities shaped by choices yet to be made. And in between, suspended on this fragile thread of now, stands humanity, at a crossroads unlike any other moment in Earth's long history. When we look at the story of life on this planet, we see cycles: emergence, adaptation, flourishing, and collapse. Civilizations rise, ecosystems shift, species evolve and vanish. Some leave striking marks, others fade into near invisibility. And now, for the first, or perhaps the latest time, there is a species with the power to see the full scale of this process, to understand both the forces that shaped the past and the consequences that will shape the future. That awareness is a kind of privilege, but also a profound responsibility. We might be the first civilization to reach this level of planetary influence, altering the chemistry of the atmosphere, redirecting the flow of rivers, reshaping landscapes on a scale visible from space. If so, the choices we make now will define what it means for a species to inherit a planet with consciousness, creativity, and foresight. But we could also be one link in a long chain, following civilizations that rose and fell in epochs lost to time, and perhaps preceding others that will come after us, equipped with the lessons or the warnings we leave behind. Or, in a more sobering possibility, we might be the last, the culmination of a long experiment in intelligence, facing the stark reality that our actions determine whether the story of conscious life continues or stops here. What does it mean to occupy this crossroads? It means that every decision carries weight far beyond the immediate, far beyond ourselves. The energy we consume, the landscapes we alter, the knowledge we preserve, or fail to preserve, will ripple across centuries, perhaps even millions of years. Our cities, technologies, and infrastructures are temporary, destined to decay under the persistent forces of nature. Yet the chemical and geological traces of our civilization, carbon ratios in sediments, plastic particles buried in layers of soil, radioactive isotopes from energy production, could endure long after the last tower collapses and the last street cracks under the pressure of roots and weather. In a sense, we are already leaving a message in the geological record, one that future observers, human or otherwise, might interpret, study, or puzzle over. This crossroads is not merely about survival. It is about stewardship. The earth itself does not demand our care, yet life has provided us with the capacity to observe, reflect, and make choices with awareness of consequences. That capacity is rare in the history of this planet, and rare in the universe as we understand it. And yet, rarity does not guarantee wisdom. Awareness in itself is only the beginning. It is what we do with that knowledge, how we apply it to the systems we influence, that will define the long-term trajectory of life on Earth. To grasp the scale of this responsibility, it helps to think in cycles. Every civilization, every ecosystem, every species is part of a broader rhythm. Patterns repeat, sometimes in ways we can perceive, sometimes hidden beneath layers of complexity. If intelligence is a recurring feature of life, then our moment is part of a continuum, a window of opportunity to shape not just our immediate world, but potentially the very conditions under which intelligence can persist across time. And if we are unique, truly the first, then this moment is even more extraordinary. We are the experiment unfolding in real time, the test case for what conscious life can do when given both power and foresight. What, then, does it mean to act wisely at a crossroads? It means seeing the interplay of past, present, and future. It means understanding that history is not only a story to be studied, but a set of lessons to be internalized. Extinctions, collapses, and recoveries remind us that nothing is permanent. That complexity can unravel in the blink of a geological eye. The fossil record whispers that resilience is inherent in life, but it also reminds us that fragility accompanies advancement. Every ecosystem altered, every species displaced, every technological advance carries potential for both creation and destruction. At a crossroads, knowledge must meet humility, power must meet foresight, and imagination must meet responsibility. The crossroads we occupy is also a moment of reflection. As we look outward to the cosmos and inward into ourselves, we must consider the legacy we wish to leave. What stories do we want future generations, or future intelligences, to find encoded in sediment structures or data streams? Do we aim to leave behind evidence of creativity, cooperation, and care? Or do we leave only scars, warnings written in carbon, metal, and synthetic chemicals? The choices we make are a kind of message, whether we intend them as such or not, whether they endure for decades, centuries, or millions of years. And yet, the crossroads is not merely about control or influence. It is also about presence, the recognition that this moment is unique in the history of our species and perhaps in the history of the planet. The sun is rising over landscapes shaped by billions of years of geology. Life is pulsing through oceans and forests sculpted by evolution. And we are here, conscious and aware, capable of perception and reflection. That awareness, rare as it is, gives meaning to the crossroads. To stand here is to witness the convergence of forces vast and ancient, and to have the ability, however limited, to direct their unfolding with intent. In a deeper sense, the crossroads asks us to reconcile temporality with impact. We are temporary, yet our actions are permanent in their consequences. We exist for mere moments on the scale of planetary time, yet in that fleeting interval, we can catalyze changes that endure far longer than our individual lifespans. We are both ephemeral and consequential, fragile and influential. That paradox is the essence of being at a crossroads. It demands awareness, careful thought, and a recognition that the present is the fulcrum on which past legacies and future possibilities balance. Finally, the crossroads is a point of continuity. Life on Earth will persist in some form, whether or not humanity endures. The cycles of evolution, adaptation, and intelligence may continue long after we are gone. In this sense, the present is a bridge between what has come before and what may come after. By acting with foresight and responsibility, we do not merely prolong our species, we contribute to the broader continuity of life itself. We become caretakers of a moment that stretches across time, aware that our influence resonates beyond the boundaries of human experience. To stand at this crossroads is to embrace both wonder and responsibility. It is to see ourselves as part of a continuum, yet recognize the singularity of the moment we occupy. It is to acknowledge that while we cannot control every outcome, we can shape the conditions under which the next chapter of life, human or otherwise, unfolds. Awareness becomes action, reflection becomes choice, and presence becomes legacy. And so, as we contemplate the present as a crossroads, we are reminded of the power inherent in being conscious within time. We are neither entirely masters of the future, nor passive observers of the past. We are active participants, witnesses, and shapers of an ongoing story, whose depth stretches back billions of years, and whose continuation may extend for millions more. The crossroads is not a destination. It is a condition, a responsibility, and an opportunity. In the next journey, as we look back and forward, we are left with a quiet meditation. That awareness itself is a gift, Responsibility itself is an honor, and the continuity of life, beyond any single species, is a reminder of the resilience and mystery that define our world. The present may be fleeting, but it is infinitely precious, the one place where choice, reflection, and action converge. And so we pause here, at the fulcrum of time, where the past whispers, the future beckons, and the present, the fragile, fleeting present, holds the power to shape everything yet to come.